The night my son changed the locks on my own house. I stood outside in the cold, holding a set of keys that suddenly meant nothing. I remember staring at the door, trying the lock again and again, like somehow it would change its mind. But it didn't. The key turned halfway, then stopped. That's when I realized something was terribly wrong. My name was still on the property. I had built that house with my own hands. Every brick, every beam, every memory inside those walls belonged to me. And yet, I couldn't get in. My name is Daniel Harper. I'm 71 years old, and until that night, I believed my son Michael was someone I could trust with anything. I had given him everything over the years. Not just money, not just support, but trust. The kind of trust a father gives when he believes his child will carry on his legacy. But standing there in the dark, locked out of my own home, I began to understand something painful. Michael didn't see me as his father anymore. He saw me as a problem. It had started slowly, like most betrayals do. Small changes, subtle shifts in behavior that were easy to ignore at first. Michael had moved back in with me about a year earlier after his business failed. He said he needed time to get back on his feet. I didn't hesitate. Of course I let him move in. He was my son. But over time, things began to feel different. He started making decisions without asking me, rearranging furniture, hiring contractors to fix things that didn't need fixing. He even started talking about upgrading the property, as if it was already his. At first, I thought he was just trying to help. But then came the conversations. The ones where he started suggesting I should take it easy or consider downsizing. He mentioned retirement homes once or twice, always casually, like he was planting seeds. I didn't like it, but I brushed it off. I told myself he was just worried about me. That's what I wanted to believe. But about 2 weeks before that night, something happened that made me pay closer attention. I came home from the grocery store and found Michael sitting at the dining table with a man I had never seen before. They were going through papers, documents with my address on them. When I asked what was going on, Michael smiled and said it was nothing, just financial planning. The man introduced himself as a property consultant. I didn't like the sound of that, but Michael quickly changed the subject. He had a way of doing that, redirecting conversations before they got too uncomfortable. That was the moment I started watching more carefully. I didn't confront him. I didn't argue. I just observed. And what I saw made me uneasy. Phone calls late at night. Meetings he didn't tell me about. And then one day, I noticed something that changed everything. My house keys, the spare set I kept in the drawer, were gone. When I asked Michael about it, he said he had taken them just in case. I didn't think much of it at the time, but I should have, because a few days later, I came home and noticed the front door lock looked different. It was subtle. Most people wouldn't have noticed. But I had installed that lock myself years ago. I knew every scratch on it. And this one didn't match. I asked Michael about it, and he laughed it off. Said he had upgraded it for security reasons. Again, I let it go. I shouldn't have. The night everything changed, I had gone out for dinner with an old friend. It was the first time in weeks I had left the house for more than an hour. When I came back, it was late. The street was quiet. The lights inside the house were on. Everything looked normal. Until I tried to open the door. The key didn't work. At first, I thought I was just tired. Maybe I was using the wrong key. But after the third attempt, I knew. The lock had been changed. Not upgraded. Replaced. And suddenly, all those small moments from the past few weeks came rushing back. The missing keys. The strange meetings. The conversations about moving out. It all made sense now. I knocked on the door. Hard. Michael, I called out. No answer. I knocked again. Louder this time. Michael, open the door. Still nothing. But I knew he was inside. I could see the light under the door. I could hear movement. He was there. He just wasn't opening the door. That's when the truth hit me. My son had locked me out of my own home. I stood there for a long moment, not knowing what to do. Part of me wanted to break the door down. Another part of me wanted to walk away and never come back. But instead, I did something else. I stepped back, took out my phone, and made a call. Not to Michael. To someone who already knew this day might come. Hello, the voice answered. It's Daniel, I said quietly. It finally happened. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then a calm response. I'll meet you first thing in the morning. I hung up and looked at the house one more time. The place I had built. The place I had trusted my son to respect. He thought changing the locks would give him control. What he didn't know was that the locks were the least important part of that house. Because while Michael believed he had shut me out, I had already made sure that everything inside those walls still belonged to me. And the moment he tried to claim it as his, everything he thought he owned was about to disappear. That night, I didn't try to get back inside. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I didn't call the police. Instead, I walked away from my own house, calmly, quietly, like a man who had already seen this moment coming. Because the truth is, I had. About 3 weeks before Michael changed those locks, something inside me had started to shift. It wasn't one big moment. It was a series of small things that didn't feel right. The way he spoke about the house, like it was already his. The way he stopped asking and started deciding. The way he looked at me sometimes, not with respect, but with impatience. Like I was in the way. And then there were the documents. The day I saw him sitting with that property consultant, flipping through papers with my address on them. That was the day I stopped trusting blindly. I didn't confront him. I didn't accuse him. I did something much more important. I prepared. The call I made that night outside my locked door wasn't random. It was to a man named Charles Bennett, my lawyer for over 25 years. The same man who helped me build my estate plan after my wife passed away. A careful man. A quiet man. The kind of man who doesn't speak much, but when he does, it matters. By the time I reached his office the next morning, he already had everything ready. "I assume this is about your son," he said as I sat down across from him. "Yes," I replied. He changed the locks. Charles nodded slowly, like this was just confirmation of something he already suspected. I'm not surprised. That didn't shock me. Because when you've spent decades dealing with families, money, and inheritance, you start to see patterns. And Michael, whether he realized it or not, had been following one of the oldest ones in the book. "Let's review the situation," Charles said, opening a folder. Inside were documents I had signed 2 weeks earlier. Documents Michael knew nothing about. "The house on Willow Creek Drive," Charles continued, "is no longer in your personal name." I nodded. "Correct. Ownership was transferred into the Harper Property Trust." "Yes." "And the trustee?" "You," I said. Charles closed the folder. "Then legally speaking, your son has no authority over that property. Not just limited authority. No authority." And that was the part Michael didn't understand. He thought living in the house gave him control. He thought having access to my keys gave him power. He thought I was too old, too slow, too trusting to notice what he was doing. But what he didn't know was that the moment I sensed something was wrong, I had already taken steps to protect everything. "Has he attempted any transactions?" Charles asked. "Not yet," I said. "But he will." Charles leaned back in his chair. "Then we let him." That might sound strange to some people. Why not stop it immediately? Why not confront him? Because sometimes the truth only reveals itself when you give someone enough rope. And Michael was already pulling hard. Later that afternoon, Michael sat inside what he now believed was his house. My house. The same living room. The same furniture. The same photographs still hanging on the walls. But the feeling was different. Because for the first time, he believed he was in control. He walked around the house like it belonged to him. Checked the locks again. Looked at his phone. Made a few calls. One of those calls was to the same property consultant I had seen weeks earlier. "Yeah," Michael said, pacing near the window. "He's out. Completely out." There was a pause as the other man spoke. "No," Michael continued. "He doesn't have access anymore." Another pause. "Yeah, we can move forward." Move forward. That was the moment Michael crossed the line from planning to acting. Because moving forward meant one thing. He was about to do something official. Something legal. Or at least, something he believed was legal. The next morning, Michael arrived at a real estate office across town. The same consultant was waiting for him, along with a young agent eager to close a deal. "Mr. Harper," the agent said with a smile, "we're excited to get started." Michael nodded confidently. "I want to list the property immediately." "Of course," the agent replied. "We'll just need the ownership documents and authorization." Michael handed over a folder. Inside it was a copy of an old document. An outdated version of my property records. Records that no longer reflected reality. The agent looked through the papers quickly. "Everything seems in order," she said. But she hadn't checked the most important thing. The current title. Because if she had, she would have seen the truth. The house no longer belonged to Daniel Harper. It belonged to the Harper Property Trust. And the trustee wasn't Michael. Back at Charles Bennett's office, we were already watching everything unfold. "Listing request has been submitted," Charles said, glancing at his screen. That was fast, I replied. Faster than most, he said. That's the thing about people who think they're winning. They rush. They skip steps. They assume no one is watching. But we were. Every document Michael submitted, every form he signed, every claim he made about ownership was being recorded, and every single one of them was building a case. Because here's the truth Michael didn't understand. You don't need to stop someone immediately when they're making a mistake. Sometimes, you let the mistake grow, because the bigger it becomes, the harder it is to escape. By the end of that week, the house was officially listed on the market. Photos taken, description written, price set. Michael stood in the living room while the photographer worked, giving instructions like he owned the place. Make sure you get the backyard, he said. That's a big selling point. Selling point. The words felt almost surreal, because he wasn't just living in my house anymore. He was trying to sell it. And that's when the situation changed completely. Because listing a property without authority is one thing. Selling it, that's something else entirely. That's when lawyers get involved. That's when banks start verifying. That's when the system begins to look closer. And Michael was about to find that out the hard way. A few days later, an offer came in. A strong one. Above asking price. The kind of offer that moves quickly. The kind that brings in serious buyers. Michael didn't hesitate. He accepted it. And just like that, he stepped into a situation he couldn't control anymore. Because once contracts are signed, once money starts moving, the truth doesn't stay hidden for long. And very soon, Michael would discover something he never expected. Changing the locks was the smallest mistake he made. By the time Michael accepted the offer, he believed the hardest part was over. In his mind, he had already won. The house was listed, a buyer had stepped forward with a strong price, and now all that remained was paperwork. Simple, clean, and fast. That's how he saw it. But real estate doesn't work on belief. It works on verification. And verification is where everything began to fall apart. The buyers were a couple in their late 40s, serious people with real money and a careful approach. They weren't emotional buyers. They didn't rush. They followed process, which meant the moment the offer was accepted, their bank and their legal team stepped in. That's when the questions started. Not loud at first, not aggressive, just quiet, professional questions that slowly began to reveal the truth. The title company ran a standard ownership check, something they do with every property. It usually takes a few hours, sometimes a day. But when the report came back, the name they found wasn't Michael Harper. It wasn't even Daniel Harper. It was something else entirely. The Harper Property Trust. At first, the title officer thought it was a clerical error, maybe an outdated record. So they checked again. Then a third time. Same result. The legal owner of the property was not an individual. It was a protected trust. And trusts don't operate the way individuals do. They don't allow just anyone to sell property. Only the trustee has that authority. And the trustee listed on record was not Michael. That's when the tone changed. The title company contacted the buyer's lawyer. The buyer's lawyer contacted the real estate agent. And within a few hours, the real estate agent was calling Michael. Hey, we need to talk, she said, her voice tight. What's going on? Michael asked, already sensing something was off. There's an issue with the title. What kind of issue? The property isn't listed under your name. Michael laughed slightly, trying to brush it off. That's impossible. It's my father's house. There was a pause on the other end. Yes, she said carefully, but it's not in his name anymore either. That's when Michael's confidence cracked for the first time. What do you mean? It's owned by a trust. The Harper Property Trust. Silence. Michael stood in the middle of the living room. The same room he had been walking through like an owner just days before. Now it felt different. Smaller. Tighter. That doesn't make sense, he said slowly. The title report is very clear, the agent replied. And the buyers are requesting verification of authority before moving forward. Authority. That word hit harder than anything else. Because Michael didn't have it. But instead of stepping back and asking questions, he made another mistake. He tried to push forward. I have power of attorney, he said quickly. Then we'll need to verify that, the agent replied. And that's when things moved out of Michael's control. Because the moment someone says, verify, documents start moving. Lawyers get involved. Records get pulled. And in this case, the truth was already waiting. At Charles Bennett's office, we received the notification before Michael even hung up his phone. They flagged the title, Charles said, looking at his screen. That was quick, I replied. Faster than he expected. Charles said calmly. I nodded. Is the trustee record clear? Very clear, he said. There's no ambiguity. That meant one thing. Michael couldn't explain his way out of this. He couldn't argue it. He couldn't pretend it was a misunderstanding. The system had already identified the problem, and now it was closing in. Later that afternoon, Michael rushed into another meeting. This time, it wasn't just the agent. It was the buyer's lawyer on a conference call, along with a representative from the title company. The tone was completely different now. Professional, direct, uncomfortable. Mr. Harper, the lawyer began. We need to confirm your legal authority to sell the property located on Willow Creek Drive. Michael swallowed. I have power of attorney for my father. Please provide the document. Michael opened his folder and pulled out the paper he had been relying on. The same one he thought gave him control. The same one that had already been revoked. He scanned it and sent it over. A few seconds passed. Then a minute. Then the lawyer spoke again. This document is no longer valid. Michael felt his chest tighten. What do you mean? It was revoked 2 weeks ago. The room went silent. Michael looked at the paper in his hand like it had betrayed him. That's not possible, he said. It is, the lawyer replied calmly. We have the updated filing. That was the moment everything shifted. Not slowly. Not gradually. All at once. Because in that instant, Michael realized something he had never even considered. I knew. I had known what he was doing. And I had acted before he could. This doesn't change anything, Michael said quickly, trying to recover. I still live in the house. I still manage everything. That is irrelevant, the lawyer replied. You do not have the legal authority to sell the property. The buyer spoke next. We're withdrawing from the deal, Mark said firmly. And we expect full reimbursement of any associated costs, his wife added. Michael felt the ground slipping beneath him. Wait, he said, we can fix this. But there was nothing to fix. Because this wasn't a negotiation problem. It was a legal problem. And legal problems don't respond to confidence. They respond to facts. Back at Charles Bennett's office, I sat quietly as everything unfolded exactly the way we expected. He's trying to salvage it, Charles said. He won't, I replied. No, Charles agreed. He won't. Because Michael had already gone too far. He hadn't just listed the property. He had signed documents claiming authority he didn't have. He had entered into an agreement under false representation. And now, every step he took was being documented. Not by us. By the system itself. The next call Michael received wasn't from a buyer. Or an agent. Or even a lawyer. It was from the title company. Mr. Harper, the representative said. We need to inform you that this transaction has been flagged for irregularities. Irregularities? Michael repeated. Yes. Specifically regarding ownership and authorization. Michael ran his hand through his hair. This is getting blown out of proportion. I'm afraid it's not, the voice replied. We are required to report this to the appropriate authorities if the matter is not resolved. Authorities. That word changed everything. Because now, this wasn't just about a failed sale. It was about potential fraud. And Michael knew it. That evening, he sat alone in the living room. The same room he had felt so confident in just days before. Now it felt different. Quiet. Heavy. Uncertain. He looked around at the walls, the furniture, the photographs. All the things he thought he controlled. And for the first time, he understood something. None of it was his. Not legally. Not truly. And the person he thought he had outsmarted had been watching the entire time. The next morning, Michael would come looking for me. Not as the man in control. Not as the one making decisions. But as a son, finally realizing the cost of his actions. And when that moment came, the truth wouldn't be hidden behind documents anymore. It would be standing right in front of him. The next morning, I was sitting in Charles Bennett's office when the call came in. He's here, the receptionist said quietly. Charles looked at me. You want to see him? I didn't answer immediately. I just stared at the window for a moment, watching the slow movement of traffic outside. For 71 years, I had lived a life built on patience. I had worked hard, built my home, raised my family, and trusted the people closest to me. And now, everything had come down to this moment. Yes, I said finally. Send him in. A few seconds later, the door opened. Michael walked in. But he didn't look like the same man who had stood in my living room days earlier, talking about selling points and giving orders like he owned the place. His shoulders were lower now. His face looked tired. There was no confidence left in his eyes. Only worry. Only realization. Dad, he said quietly. I didn't respond right away. I just looked at him. Really looked at him. Because sometimes, the hardest part of betrayal isn't the action itself. It's seeing the person you trusted become someone you no longer recognize. Michael took a few steps forward. I need to talk to you. Charles stood up. I'll give you both some time, he said, leaving the room. Now it was just the two of us. Father and son. But it didn't feel like that anymore. What happened? I asked calmly. Michael let out a shaky breath. They stopped the sale. I know. They said I didn't have authority. You didn't. He ran his hand through his hair. I didn't know you changed everything. That sentence told me everything. Not I'm sorry. Not I made a mistake. Just, I didn't know. You didn't ask, I replied. Michael looked down. I thought I was doing what was best. For who? I asked. He didn't answer. Because he couldn't. We both knew the truth. He hadn't been thinking about me. He had been thinking about control. About ownership. About getting ahead of something he believed would eventually be his anyway. Why didn't you just talk to me? I asked. Michael's voice dropped. Because I knew you'd say no. That honesty hit harder than anything else. Because it meant this wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't confusion. It was a choice. You're right, I said quietly. I would have said no. Michael looked up, frustration mixing with regret. Why? It's just a house. Just a house. I shook my head slowly. No, it's not. I walked over to the window. That house is where you took your first steps. It's where your mother spent the last years of her life. It's where I built everything I had after losing her. I turned back to him. And you tried to sell it like it was nothing. Michael's eyes filled with something I hadn't seen before. Not anger. Not pride. Something closer to shame. I didn't think about it like that, he said. No, I replied. You didn't think at all. The room went quiet again. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then Michael took a deep breath. What happens now? That was the question. Not just legally, but personally. Because what comes after betrayal is never simple. The sale is gone, I said. The buyers have walked away. The trust still owns the house. And me? I looked at him carefully. You're still my son. His shoulders relaxed slightly. But I wasn't finished. But that doesn't mean nothing changes. The tension came back instantly. What do you mean? I mean trust doesn't rebuild overnight. Michael nodded slowly. I understand. Do you? I asked. He hesitated, then nodded again. Yes. I walked back to the desk and picked up a folder. Inside were documents Charles and I had prepared. Not for revenge. For protection. I made changes, I said. What kind of changes? The trust stays exactly as it is. Michael swallowed. Okay. But you're no longer involved in managing anything. His eyes widened slightly. What? You won't make decisions about the house. You won't handle finances. You won't represent me in any legal matter. Michael looked like he wanted to argue, but he didn't. Because deep down, he knew he had lost that right. I need time, I continued. Time to decide what role you have in my life moving forward. Michael nodded again, slower this time. I get it. But there was one more thing. One condition, I said. He looked up. You move out. That one hit him the hardest. Dad, you changed the locks on me, I said calmly. You made it very clear you wanted control of that house. That's not. Don't. I interrupted gently. Just don't. Michael closed his mouth. Because there was no argument left. He had crossed the line. And now, he had to face the consequences. I'll give you 2 weeks, I said. After that, I want the house back exactly the way it was. Michael nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. Okay. He turned toward the door, then stopped. Dad, yes. I am sorry. This time, it sounded real. Not defensive. Not forced. Just real. I looked at him for a moment. I hope you are. He left the room quietly. And just like that, it was over. Not with shouting. Not with anger. But with something much heavier. Understanding. 2 weeks later, Michael moved out. No drama. No arguments. Just silence. The locks were changed again. This time by me. I walked back into my house alone. The same house. The same memories. The same quiet presence of everything that had come before. Nothing had been taken. Nothing had been sold. Everything was still mine. But something had changed. Not the house. Not the walls. The relationship. Because some things, once broken, don't return to what they were. They become something else. Something quieter. Something more careful. That evening, I sat on the porch, just like I used to years ago. The sun was setting. The neighborhood was calm. And for the first time in weeks, everything felt still again. Michael thought changing the locks would give him control. What he didn't understand was that control was never in the locks. It was in the name, and my name was still on everything.